whole healthcare industry is going to change dramatically in the next couple of years.
To chronic disease management and the preventative aspect of care.
AI can now understand the key clinical concepts of what's being verbalized in healthcare.
Welcome to Leaders in Healthcare. I'm Dr. Jordan Vollrath, physician, entrepreneur, and chief medical officer for Cherry Health. We're talking about all things healthcare. Join us as we speak to innovators, industry leaders, and the people working to drive the healthcare system forward. All right, today we're talking to Stephen Armstrong. Stephen holds a master's degree in public policy and management and has spent a career as a leader, soldier, and humanitarian. Steve has served as a soldier in the Canadian Army, was a municipal administrator, and an executive and disaster management expert with the Red Cross. Currently, he works as a leadership expert, coach, consultant, speaker, and educator through stephenarmstrong.ca. Specifically, he's operating in the healthcare field. Steve serves as the governor and director and committee chair with the College of Registered Nurses of Alberta, as well as with the Calgary Foothills Primary Care Network. He's led emergency and public health responses to disasters and conflicts, and in his downtime, Steve enjoys spending time with his wife, Deborah, and is proud stepfather to 3 fine young men and grandfather to 3 more. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jordan. That sounds great. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so in general, I really find it fascinating, kind of the crossover between the armed forces experience and then coming now to more of the leadership coaching role. How have you found the transition just in the terms of your career steps?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Actually, I found it frustrating in one way because in the military, leadership is everything. Every day, and you better be a good leader or you're not going to succeed, or worse, someone's going to get hurt or killed.
And
in the military too, there's a sense of the mission is paramount. And in most organizations in the real world, in the civilian world, life and death is not front of mind on everybody's day-to-day task list, and the mission gets kind of blurry. Not to say there's no politics in the military, but politics and mission creep and all of those vague, terrible management words get in the way normally. So I found it a little frustrating when I went out of the military and then got into the real world of working and leading. But I found that the whole concept of focusing on the objectives, focusing on what's important, focusing on your people, and making sure everybody's clear about what's happening around you to be instantaneously transferable, even though the people maybe weren't quite prepared to receive it.
Good, we open to the feedback. That's key.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, so can I ask you, when you're in the military then, what makes a good leader? How would you know when the person above you was doing a good job, had your own best interests in mind, the interests of the organization? What were some of those tells that you're like, okay, this person is switched on and going the right direction?
Oh, that's good. Well, I would say a couple things. Number one is that there's this, in the military in particular, this whole model of lead by example. And so somebody's generally in the military, somebody's usually fit, strong, smart, articulate. I think most people who don't have the experience of being exposed to the military don't fully appreciate the level of education and the level of training that goes into somebody who becomes, a company commander, a battalion. Company in the Canadian military army is about 100 plus people. A battalion is generally 500 to 700 people. And by the time you get to lead one of those organizations, you probably got the equivalency of at least a master's or 2. And probably by the time you get to a colonel's position, you've got a equivalency to a PhD. So you're extraordinarily well educated. You're well rounded in that you have led and been involved in other functions of the military, so that when you get to lead something, you've been exposed to administration and supply and whatever, transportation and all of those functions that make a army unit function and fight.
I can imagine the military is, the opposite of nepotism. It really is that meritocracy of rising through the ranks as opposed to just getting plopped in there because of who you know.
Yeah, well, that happens. It's an organization of people.
Yeah.
So
fair.
If you know people and people know you, you've got a better chance to get ahead. But the interesting thing about a military leader, and certainly the Canadian Army and military in particular, is that you don't ever get a job without knowing that job. So, if you're getting promoted to become a company commander, or commanding officer, you have done that job in an acting role. And then you went away to school and you learned everything you needed to know to do that job. And then you went and you led some smaller parts of the organization. And by the time you get to the boss's chair, you are completely qualified to do that job. Or in the real world, in the civilian world, and I know for sure it happens in the medical world too, is you get promoted and then somebody expects you to go ahead and be good at your job. And you've probably never been exposed to half of the things you're going to face even the first day, let alone the first year.
It's an intimidating time.
Oh my gosh, it's scary. Well, my motto that I passed on as best people will ever listen to me is, the world is full of failed site superintendents who used to be perfectly good carpenters. So, Jordan, you're a great carpenter. Guess what? You're going to run this gigantic building project, and you're not prepared to do that. You're not trained to do that. And what's generally going to happen to you is you're going to fail. And so in the civilian world, we do a really terrible job at preparing people to sit in the leadership position and lead people and be clear about objectives and achieve things that you're supposed to. And you don't have to be a good person. There's lots of bosses I had in the Army that, I probably wouldn't go for a beer with that person, but I respected them as a professional and as a soldier, as a leader. So it's not a personal thing, but it's a professional thing. Whereas I think finding too often in normal workplaces, people want to be liked. People don't want to upset people. People avoid uncomfortable conversations, which is the detriment to what you're trying to achieve.
So what are some of those common things then? Like you mentioned, part of the criteria to be a good leader is being able to walk the walk, right? Forged in the battles and fire itself.
Yeah.
But it's not all the case, right? You're a good carpenter, but bad site super. Like, what are some of those characteristics that are, qualify a person or make them higher likelihood to succeed in a leadership role?
Well, there's competency in your profession or your trade or your skill set. If you're a good doctor, that helps. But that's not. We've all met good doctors who aren't very nice people. It's just what it is. Like and sometimes you just want a really good scientist. You don't want a nice person. You just want somebody who can fix the problem. But I think Brene Brown, who most people probably have heard of, the social worker. Pretty famous, most watched TED Talk in the history of TED about vulnerability, talks about having a soft front but a steel spine. So you need to lead by example. You need to be ethical and moral and courageous in everything you do and not be afraid of things, but you also need to have an empathetic ear and not a sense of vulnerability in that you're breaking down in tears in front of your people every day, but that they understand where you're coming from, and you can appreciate, as a leader, you can appreciate where your people are and what they're going through. So if you've never, I'll use a simple, because it's a friend of mine right today in Alberta, Jasper, the town of Jasper was evacuated due to a forest fire. Well, if you're telling people how to function and how to live through something like that, and you've never experienced it, doesn't mean you just need to have a sense of what it's going to be like for people being impacted by that fire and also the people leading it. Then you can appreciate when people say, like, it's chaos, man. Like, people are making it up as they go almost every second. Yeah, there's a plan, but people are trying their best. And if you don't have the sense and the vulnerability to appreciate what your people are going through, then you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, the field experience, the lived experience in the real world goes a long way.
Yeah. So, one example, I would go back to one time we had a project. We were supposed to make all these partnership deals with major municipalities in the province of Alberta for disaster management. And the young guy that was the manager in charge of it had organized a meeting of all of the people from these communities. And I asked him if he was prepared to do this. And I says, do you want me to come? And he said, oh, no, I got it. But the next morning he came in and his head was down, his tail was between his legs, and he got killed in this meeting. Like, these people just turned on him, and I felt bad because I personally failed him because I should have been there. I should have known better. But anyway, I believe that I knew that he had the capacity to do it, but he bumped into something pretty tough. And he was afraid to tell me because he'd let me down. let the organization down. And I said, well, that's good. The last things he expected to hear out of my mouth was, that's good. I'm glad that happened. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, quite frankly, I knew something was going to turn bad in this whole project. And now it has. And now we know what it is. So now we can move forward. I just didn't know what it was going to be and when it was going to happen. So because I had that level of experience, I could be empathetic with poor Corey and kind of support him as we went through this thing.
Yeah, clearly it was going to like rear its head at some point.
Someplace it had to.
So in a non-disastrous fashion.
Yeah, it was hard. It was complex, and there was too many egos and personalities and too much small p politics involved with it. Without for something not to go wrong, I would have been shocked if it would have just sailed right through.
So when it comes to some of these like innate, almost inborn sounding qualities that make a good leader, how can somebody hone those skills, right? So other than jumping into a leadership role, perhaps like taking on more of a leadership role, even in your current position within your current team, flexing those muscles, how do you improve those aspects of yourself?
This show is brought to you by Cherry Health, Canada's medical network where healthcare practitioners connect. Physicians, pharmacists, nurses, chiropractors, and all other healthcare professionals can sign up for free, start connecting, messaging with colleagues, or checking out job opportunities posted by thousands of employers across Canada. With dozens of healthcare-specific job filters and search options, we make it easy to advance your career, find your dream job, or line up your next locum. Hundreds of new jobs posted every week. www.cherry.health to get connected today.
Yeah. Well, my first advice would be don't do an MBA and expect to come away with that sort of capacity to lead a team in a business.
Yeah, the paper credential isn't everything.
Well, there's lots of things you'll learn there, but you're not going to necessarily learn. I would certainly follow thought leaders on the subject. There's many of them, and I think we talked about what's his name, Jocko, the Navy SEAL guy, Simon Sinek, and a lot of those thinkers. I would caution people a little bit because a lot of those guys operate at a pretty high theoretical level, and sometimes the practical piece is missing. So I would expose myself to different leaders. And if you are somebody who wants to get ahead in an organization, the first thing I'd be doing is go down the hall and tell your boss that I want to get ahead, so they know. So I have somebody I coach right now, and this chief operating officer's position came open within the organization. And I said, are you going to apply? And she said, well, I'm not sure. And I said, well, I'll apply. Just to express the interest. She didn't get the job, but they've had the two conversations with her now about how to develop her career so that she would be qualified in the future. And they wouldn't have necessarily known that had she not said that. The second thing I would do is every time some project came up or some opportunity came up that would allow you to learn something, is to volunteer and step into the breach and figure it out. Small stuff, like don't take, like, if you're an incoming engineer, don't take on building the Hoover Dam, but start picking up small projects where you can learn and expose and be ruthless about asking for feedback about how it went. Where can I improve? How can this have done? And don't take the platitude, oh, it was great, you did a good job, thank you. No, be critical. Like, ask for good advice and then work on improving that. And people will, first off, you start showing yourself as a leader. And secondly, as while that's happening, you're learning how to be a leader and get out of your profession, out of your normal trade. So I don't know. Probably don't have a very good analogy for a doctor, but for example, maybe there might be somebody on a mat leave that's running like the administrative section of a clinic or a hospital. Well, volunteer to go do that for a while so you understand how all that stuff happens. How you can't do anything without toilet paper. So how do we do this? How do we get toilet paper to the clinic, right? And so expose yourself to different things and take the opportunity to do a locum either in a different clinic or a different setting. I love going outside of my organization. In the military, you always spend time outside of your organization, working with other people. And you realize, oh, not everybody's as screwed up as I thought they were. And nor is everybody as good as I thought they were. So he says, okay, we're not that bad. We're okay. There's some good things over here. I'm going to bring that back to my organization. And there's the stuff over there. No, I'm not going to do that. That's bad news. I'm going to keep focus over here. So I think expose yourself to the broadest levels of education and experiences that you can, so that when you become the leader, it's like, okay, I understand.
Well, I like that you pair up that, you got to jump in head first for all these small opportunities, seize the day when it comes to that, but also, being receptive to feedback. I guess, in general, in terms of leadership, that radical candor approach, right? Of just purely pragmatic. This is in the interest of everybody's, progress, of like, we got to be open with our feedback. We got to be honest with each other in order to improve. And I mean, that's a big part of how, med school training goes, nursing training goes, is just, you got to be willing to take the feedback, the good and the bad.
Yeah. And it's not personal. Like, if it's personal, you should know that. But normally feedback it's not a personal thing about you as a human being. It's about your performance. Yeah. Now, could it be worded differently? Could it, maybe some
a little bit of tact and grace.
A little tact in here time and again does help. Yeah. But it's not a personal slight against you, and it's not against your mom or your kids. So suck it up. Take the advice for take what you're hearing. I remember one time somebody told me I was a terrible supervisor. And that cut right to the core. But once I reflected on it, I realized the person was right, because I hate supervising people. Like, Jordan, did you do what I asked you to do? Can I see what you did? Can I check on it? Yeah. I hate that. That's not in my character. But then I realized that the people around me needed me to be there and wanted me to be there. I had to figure out the right balance of not micromanaging, but not standing back and watching people implode, and to be so that I understood what they were facing and that they needed my advice. And they also needed, like you said, radical candor in an honest, frank way that says, you know what, Jordan, Bob, Mary, this is not going well. And what I've learned in that is there's the 3 F's: facts, feelings, and future. So if something goes wrong with somebody, so for example, say somebody's coming in late today. They come in late quite a few times over the last little while. And so it's not, you were late, you're in trouble. It's like, I saw that you were late on the 31st and the 1st, the 15th and the whatever. And the person has to say yes, because that's a fact. And you understand, the next thing is, you understand that in this role, in this job, you have to be at your desk, like a call center thing maybe, or you have to be at your desk prepared to work at 9 o'clock. Yes, I understand that. And then it's like, okay, so when you're not there, you put a burden on everybody else. There's 3 or 4 facts in a row that basically you're boxing the person into this conversation. That
you're taking the subjectivity and the emotion out of it. It's not like, I'm mad at you because you didn't show up on time. That's it's just boom, 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 logically.
Yeah. And it's like things they can't say no to, maybe. Like it's all yeses, right? Hopefully. And then it's like, okay, so you understand now where you're putting me as a leader and your peers are, with you coming in late all the time. Now you're into the feelings. And then it's the future. Wow. And what do you think of this? What's going on with you? Well, it might come up that it's a single mom or a single parent, and they, the kids are sick and they can't get out the front door. And then the future is, how do we fix this? Well, I tell you what, you can come in, you can show up at 9:30 instead of 9 o'clock, but you have to stay till 4:30, or you get a half an hour for lunch. And we have to tell your peers what's going on, so they understand that you're not dogging it. You have an issue here. We have to be respectful to your privacy, but we have to make sure everyone understands what's going on. So when you're having these radical candor conversations, if you start off with the facts of the situation and the feelings of the situation, and then you make a plan to go forward for the future.
And does that ever not resonate with the person? Like, is this usually a pretty solid approach to taking to that feedback, or do you wind up with cases where they're just closed off, or, refusing to accept it? That is probably a red flag. I would say like
95% of the time, the answer is yes to that. Yeah. Yes, they are open to that. When they're not open to that is when they're trying to get out of trouble. They're wrong. They know it. Now they're going to try to get out of trouble. So I had somebody one time who got a parking ticket, photo radar ticket, stop, red light on, speeding on red, photo picture. Well, there's incontrovertible proof that you went through the red light. You had the van that day. It says so right in the log.
Yeah, yeah.
You got this ticket when you had the van. Did you have the van? Yes. Did you give the van to anybody else? No. Then it has to be you. And then it became a big, well, you're a bully and you're an arsehole and you're ganging up on me. And I said, okay, well, we're going to just end this conversation short here. And I'm going to go see HR, and then we'll probably be, I didn't say this out loud, but in my mind was, this is your last day working here. So let's get the poison out of the operation as fast. And I know it's a bit of a rambly conversation, Jordan, but well, the other thing is, if you're a boss, you have to know, like when I take on a coaching client or a consulting client, when I look at their organization, one of the first questions I ask the leader is, will you fire somebody that needs to be let go because it's the wrong person and the wrong job? That doesn't mean we will, but I need to know that you will have, and we have to treat them fair and write it probably a bigger check than anybody wants to write and send them on their way. But if there's a real problem here, do you have the wherewithal and the ability and the courage to make a hard decision?
Well, somebody's got to hold everyone accountable, right? Like that's what it comes down to. And if you're the leadership role, nobody else is able to do that. And otherwise, now you have misfits, and that becomes the company culture, non-productive. I mean, that's probably one of the most important parts of
for sure
leadership is keeping the team on track.
We've just met, and I haven't asked you the question. Do you have kids?
Not yet. Not yet. One day, definitely.
Yeah. But if you have children and you have a problem child and you start focusing on the problem child, your other kids will start acting up because they see where you're focusing your attention on.
Yeah.
I guess if that's where I get my attention from, I'm going to start acting up. So you're going to have a whole bunch of people start acting up in the organization because that's how they get the attention. And then the good people will leave. And so you'll be stuck with a screw. Like in the Army, we had this term called the soup sandwich.
What is that?
You take a loaf of bread, a piece of bread, and you take a ladle of soup and you pour it on the bread and you put another piece of bread on top, and it's just a sloppy mess.
Delicious.
Yeah. So you end up with a soup sandwich in your organization. Cut your losses. Get rid of the people that are, if they are willing to perform and willing to improve and all that, that's fair game. Like give people a chance. I'm not talking about walking through a building every day and firing half the people, but if your organization is important to you and you want to achieve results, then you better be prepared to write checks. Because, and especially the worst is if you like the person. There's been some research done in the States that it takes 18 months longer to fire somebody if you like them.
I'd believe it. Believe it.
But it's not wrong. It impacts your whole organization. So
what's the opportunity cost of not acting sooner?
That's right.
And
other people leaving. Yeah, you're hurting their career, and you're losing good people because they're saying, well, I've been around a long time and I've given lots of advice and I've had to let people go myself. And the only thing that ever surprises people is somebody actually dealt with it. They never.
So I talk about this all the time with like my mental health counseling patients that, like a boundary without an actual consequence is just wishful thinking. And so the same thing applied here. You got to take that accountability and assigning it to your team, but also following through on it. You can't be just too passive and too avoidant. Otherwise, it's just not going to fly.
No. And I don't know everything. Your Cherry Health has become a significant operation, and you've got lots of clients and lots of customers and lots of employees and people that rely on you. And if you're farting around, not being clear, not making the right decisions, which are often hard decisions by definition, then you're impacting all of those people and you're putting your company at risk. I'm not picking on Cherry Health here. Because it's front of mind, right? But they're everywhere. The whole world is full of organizations, full of nice people afraid to make hard decisions and right decisions.
Yeah, this is where my business partner, Max, excels. He's German, very practical, no nonsense. Yeah, I've learned a lot from him in this department.
Yeah. So, and that in the military, you can't you can't fire somebody because they're an enrolled. Like, it's hard to kick somebody out of the military unless you have to be a really bad person.
What do you have to do to get kicked out of the military?
Yeah. Like, it's bad, but there's still this hard conversation piece, like good feedback, tough conversations.
Not shying away. What else then? So the accountability, not shying away from feedback, not shying away from making those tough decisions. Yeah. What else is like qualities of an exceptional leader that you've come across?
Communications. So a good leader should be considered the CRO of the organization, the chief reminder officer. So often as a CEO or a senior leader in an organization, you get isolated from everybody else because you're generally externally focused and whatever, you got things to do. But people need to see and hear from the leader, so you need to not just send out podcasts, with all due respect, you not just emails, not just little video messaging to people. People need to see you and hear you, and you need to be always reminding people about what the most important work is that we're doing today. So I would challenge anyone listening to this that if that person and their leadership team can't answer this one question, you're in big trouble. Is what's the one thing we have to achieve in the next 6 months or 12 months that if we do not get done, we will have deemed ourselves to have failed. But what's the one thing? And then you need to go out and tell everybody that over and over and over again, and in different ways and different models. So everyone in the organization knows that if we do not achieve this sales number or get this client or whatever it might be in the next whatever period of time, then we will have deemed to fail. And people will start to coalesce and line up on that single mission. Go back to a military term. In the military, the mission is paramount. You achieve your mission. So if everyone's understand what the objective, you can take the softer language and call it an objective, whatever it might be, that you're able to focus on that. And people will start to coalesce and align and focus on achieving it. Your sales department will understand, this is what we have to do to get this thing done.
The vision and the big picture is important for buy-in and enthusiasm. But when it comes to day-to-day operations, it's got to be very explicit and clear of what success means.
Super tactical.
Yeah.
Yeah, because guys like yourself and even me and other people, we focus where I want to be in 5 years or whatever it might be. But that's too far for your average employee. They don't understand that and they don't care. What's the one thing? And then the next piece based to build upon that is you and your leadership team should build a triangle.
What's
the leader
in the
at the top, and your direct reports, your 5 or 6, whatever number it is, direct reports at the top, and that's your first team. And that team needs to be completely aligned, so that when this director of sales walks out of a meeting and says, "This is where we're going," it's exactly the same message as the production manager or the tech IT director is saying to their people. And it's not like, walk out of the meeting and go, that was stupid. We're going to go. I don't agree with that. We're going to go off and do our own thing. Everyone needs to be aligned on that achievable mission objective, right? And those people, the more time you invest with your leadership team so that they're tight, the better it will be for everybody. And there will be none of this kind of bullshitty, kind of unwinnable, bloody battles underneath them with people arguing about what they're supposed to be doing today. Because without that guidance, all of your people underneath are going to start making it up.
How many people can one person manage? Like, is there an ideal size when it comes to like that distributed?
Yeah. A span of control generally is how it would be referred to. And I would say, again, like a lot of things in life, it would depend a little bit, but I would say, 6 to 8, 10 would be, pushing it. Certainly if you're in the teens of 12 or 14 direct reports, it's too much. So I would say if you have 14 people reporting to you, you should thin out your leadership team.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you're firing people, but it's okay. You are not on the executive team anymore. Like, you need to go over there and do your job. We'll tell you what it is. Don't worry about it.
How does that compare to the military then? Like, they have
I would say about
probably
the
a
same.
dozen different hierarchy ranks there. Is it pretty
Oh,
similar?
for sure. But in a tactical frontline unit, so an infantry battalion of the 600 or 700 people, the commanding officer would have probably about 8 direct reports.
Yeah.
8, and a couple dotted line reports. And he, even in that role. So my role in the military was a sergeant major, and I was kind of like the chief operating officer, for lack of a better term, because I was a part of the team, not line reporting to the soldiers, but I was the one that made sure everything was ready to go, kind of behind the scenes working. So there would be, the average infantry unit in Canada, and the Canadian Army would have 6 line, they call them companies, groups of soldiers of about 120. Each would have a company commander. So there's 6 and probably a couple extra people. So 6 to 8.
And what does a sergeant major in the Army do on the day-to-day basis? Is that classified, or are you allowed to actually speak about it?
It's the best job that there ever was. It was a great job. Quite frankly, my role as a sergeant major's role was, I kind of referred earlier, was so when the boss, the colonel or the major, said it's time to go and we have to go to carry out this task, my job was to make sure the soldiers were ready to do what he or she needed done. So it was sort of like, I would refer to it in articulately as the kind of the grease in the wheels, gears, to make sure everything was working. Identify leadership. A lot of it was around discipline and that kind of stuff. So if there was this problem with the soldiers, I was almost always involved with somebody. You got a whole bunch of young guys and girls in their 20s, late teens and early 20s running around. It was always somebody
testosterone and hormones just kicked in a few years ago.
It was like something was going to go wrong, So that was a frustrating part of the job, but it was actually sometimes kind of fun, because it was like, holy cow. Can't imagine that. How did they get in that kind of trouble? But so it was just to make sure that it's not an equal equivalency, but I would say, like kind of like a COO, like making sure everything was ready to go all the time.
And so was it largely like people management then, or was it more like tactics and operations and supply chain and things like that?
It was a great part of the job was all of the supply chain stuff for the organization. There was other people involved with it, but a lot of it went, make sure that it was done, the bullets and the food and the boots and the clothing. Yeah. People were looking after that. But it was more, I would say probably 75% of the job was people supporting so in the military, you have officers and you have non-commissioned officers. So the officers are lieutenants and captains and majors and colonels. And then the non-commissioned officers are like sergeants and warrant officers and the like. So a lot of it was supporting the officers, because a lot of them are shiny and new, like right out of Royal Military College or out of training. Yeah. And so making sure they could be successful, supporting career development for the soldiers so that we're on a career path that they wanted to be on. Making sure the dots were connected between the officers and the soldiers, because it did no one any good to let a young officer fail, because who was going to get hurt? Oh, right, the 30 or 40 soldiers that he was responsible or she was responsible for. So as to make sure that person had the best opportunity to be successful, and make sure that their second in command person was doing their job. So I was more directly responsible for the second in command in the organization, and so to make sure they were doing their job, because again, if they weren't doing their job, who's going to suffer? Some young 18-year-old kid that didn't deserve to suffer.
Yeah, nobody wins.
Not their fault. Nobody wins, right? So it was an awesome job.
Have you come across any kind of golden rule there? Like when it comes to leadership, how much of one's time can one spend managing people versus creating a project or just getting tasks done on their own side?
Say that again. Just rephrase that for me, just so I do a better job of answering your question. Just
Like, is it like you got to spend at least half your time managing people, following up, holding accountability, feedback sessions, strategic planning for the team versus like kind of lone wolfing it on your own project, your own mission that you're sort of uniquely positioned to try and do on your own because you're that
I would say
role.
all things being equal, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you have a project that, like you say, that you're uniquely the person to lead and to achieve it, fair enough. But I go back to something we said a little earlier: was you are responsible for the organization and the people in it and the people you're serving out of it. So most of your time should be spent making sure that people are 100% clear. You have the best possible people doing the best possible work they can. And if you are spending half of your time focused on something other than that, you better have somebody, a good second in command, or a good, person who's on top of those other things for you, because something will go wrong.
So the vast majority of the time then is like, yeah.
You build an organization based on an idea, but the only way the idea gets done is because it's full of people achieving that idea. And your job is to make sure 100% to make sure that everyone knows what's going on. And if you take your eye, like anything in life, take your eye off the ball, man, your ball's going to hit you square in the face.
You better be sure that side mission is worth it taking on then at that point.
And if it is, that's fine, but make sure you backfill something. And this might be the opportunity to find that person that you think, oh, look at that shiny, bright, smart person that has lots of potential. Now it's your time I need you to pick this piece of my role up. So I know what we did a huge restructuring amongst many when I was still with Red Cross. And the general manager, I was in Ontario at the time, and the general manager was still like signing expense claims for hundreds of people. I said, this has to stop. You have to give that away. Like, you have to set that aside. You need to be focused on this change because, everyone gets their expense checks I get it. One of them was mine. I wanted my money. But if you're not focused on the change, it will grind to a slow and painful crashing halt, and any momentum and any success will have been lost. So what's more important, a $50 expense claim or a $5 million project? So give it away.
When you're working with a coaching client, how do you even get to that point of, these different operational pieces and getting to the nitty gritty of like, okay, where do you actually have room for improvement? Is it like the client's got to be very self-directed and show up with, okay, boom, 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 here's my challenges? Or do you start out kind of doing a deep dive, bit of a summary overview of like where they're at in their role in their career? Like, how do you even get started working with a client?
Well, I would say the first couple sessions are all about just what you said, is like figuring out where they are. And hopefully, if there's no trust, then forget it. But if, we build a confidence and a trust, and at some point you really got to start peeling back the layers to find out what's really going on here. What are you worried about? What are you afraid of? What's really keeping you awake at night? And maybe I'm not necessarily always the best to be able to articulate this piece, but I've been around people for a long, long time, and I can generally be able to say, well, when I see somebody wince, when I ask a good question or pull back,
you're on the right track.
We're on the right track, so let's ask again. And similar, it wasn't the point of me doing that at the time. I was trying to get a better sense of what you're looking for. But say that again for me. Repeat. Could you say that back to me again? Just use different words.
Sorry. You're not.
Sorry. Yeah. And then, so for example, I'm not sure this is true or not, but someone told me this, and I've said it enough times that maybe it is true. Apparently, the Buddha said that you have to ask why 5 times until you truly understand. So just asking more questions, like what's going on? Why is this? Why Say that again. Tell me more about this. And eventually you'll get to the core of what's going on. And then you can start helping the person out.
Almost like a child, like
It is.
toddler. Why?
Yeah.
Why? Yeah, just deeper
exactly.
and deeper, pulling back the layers.
Yeah, and eventually you'll hopefully you'll get there, and then you can really start making progress. And most people, because they're not necessarily ever what's the word I'm looking for? Not necessarily been, like as we said, not prepared professionally, educationally, experientially to be a leader. They're scared shitless. They're afraid that they're going to get found out. This whole imposter syndrome thing.
Yeah, that's all over the healthcare field.
Yeah. So let's peel this back and find out what are you really worried about here? And a lot of times it's, I don't know how to do it. The biggest one I've learned probably most profoundly is that nobody knows how to talk to their boss. Nobody knows how to have that conversation with their boss about what's going on and what are the priorities and whatever.
So what's the context there? Like seeking clarity and direction, or like the feedback and bringing bad news?
There's little feedback.
Yeah.
And the other one is clarity. So one of the first things I suggest to somebody is to go down the hall, go talk to your boss, and ask them what their performance objectives are, business objectives are for the year. And then those suddenly become your performance objectives because you should not be working on something that's not aligned with what they're trying to achieve. And if you're not getting feedback, is then to figure out a way of having that conversation with your boss about, listen, I want to be successful. I want to support you. I need feedback on my roles to make sure I'm doing that. And so we need to figure out a way that we can have these conversations that's respectful to both of us. If the person refuses, I would suggest it's time to look for a new boss because they're not going to. And that's a problem, certainly in the Canadian healthcare model, is that a lot of the leadership is in a bureaucratic government, pseudo government organization, and they're not going to go anywhere. So you're not likely to get what you want if they're not able or willing to do that for you. You're not likely going to get it. So you have to figure out, okay, can I live with this? Can I make my little section or division the best I possibly can make it within this other part, this other thing? Excuse me. Or do I need to start considering a different role in a different place or a different part of the organization because this person isn't the boss I need or want?
How does a person wind up in that situation in the first place? Like, is it often the boss is sort of closed off, like, closed door policy, try and don't bug me as much as possible? Or does it usually come from the person that you're coaching sort of shying away from those interactions?
Well, mostly it's the person I'm coaching is shying back because they've actually seen it go bad.
Okay.
We've all been in that boardroom meeting where you look at somebody raises a question and the first response is to get their head tore off. Yeah. Do you think anybody else in the room is going to raise another issue?
Unlikely. Yeah.
Unlikely, right? Because they look down the table and see the gore and the blood on the table down the room, and they say, I'm not saying anything. So partly it's that. And if you think that as a person, you just got promoted because maybe you're not qualified or you're not, the right person, and you know that, you believe that, but your boss is the same.
Yeah, everybody's got that feeling.
Yeah. And in bureaucracies, it happens not as much, but that's even in the places like the military. Instead of dealing with a problem person, they often get moved around, and nobody's ever written them up for being not a very good boss, and they end up kind of, what is it, the Peter principle, where you get promoted to the level of your competency. Yeah, like you just get promoted because look at Steve, he's a good guy, he's been around forever, and he's nothing's in his report that he's not doing a good job, and we'll move him up.
How do you deal with that? Like, if you've got multiple layers of management or hierarchy in an organization and you feel like your direct supervisor is dropping the ball, poorly receptive to feedback, maybe you've tried talking to them directly? Like, is it appropriate to try and circumvent and go above them and complain to the next level up there? Or what do you recommend in that situation?
You will never win that fight.
Yeah.
It might be the right thing to do, but you better have a plan.
Yeah. That's not going to go well. You
will never win a fight against your boss or against the leadership of an organization, because I shouldn't say never, but unlikely. If that's a situation like certainly in a government organization, you will never win that fight.
Yeah.
Because their natural instinct is to close ranks and protect at least what they think is the right, that manager that you're probably trying to get around or figure out, and you'll be gone before they might end up leaving or being gone at some point, but you'll be gone before them. So you need to understand what you can live with.
Should you as a leader then try and take the initiative to get feedback and do like these general intakes from multiple levels of the totem pole to try and prevent a clog or a bottleneck in your organization?
Yeah, you should. Like, so for example, one of the things I always did was in the military and with Red Cross, I would always go out and talk to the soldiers or the workers or the volunteers and find out what they what's going on? What are you working on today?
Yeah.
How's it? You don't ask how they're doing. Say, what are you working on today? And
why I could soon question,
because I would soon learn. Because what are you going to say when somebody says, how are you doing today, Jordan? Fine.
Good. You?
Yeah. Good. Fine. That was great. Thanks for coming by. Get out of my way. I'm trying to get something done. If you ask them what they're working on and what they're doing, you'll get a different result. And then the next great question is, do you understand why you're doing it?
Yeah, so you're probing into their current objectives that they're working on.
And if it's not aligning with what you told their bosses to do,
interesting.
Then the communication system has failed, and you need to fix it. Now don't embarrass anybody on the shop floor, but you need to go back and figure out where this went wrong. And so that's the 100% of how much time you should be spending with your people. You should always be testing, probing, to make sure that things are going the way you expect them to go. And to the sort of the first team, that triangle model that you all agreed you would do. That's, if you have agreement there, and if something's not happening below, then you need to go and address it right away, because somebody is not, they're nodding their head up and down when you're talking to them, but in the back of their mind, they're going, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. Okay, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, and that's could be a natural human thing to do, but you cannot afford to let that happen. Now, if there's a reason, then somebody should have said something. There's a great story. Alan Mulally, who was, I think 3 ago, CEO of Ford International. When he first took over, he had I forget, you talk about span of control. Like there was 60 people in the boardroom of senior leaders of divisions and sub companies, and they were losing $14 billion with a B billion dollars a year. And they had a fancy schmancy management tool that had and it was one of those red light, green light, yellow light signaling thing. Every light was green. And his question is, if we're losing $14 billion a year, why is every light green?
Clearly something's not matching up to the reality. Yeah.
So then it was like, we have to go figure this out. And what it was people were afraid to bring bad news to the table.
So you really got to foster that communication culture.
Trust, communication, open language, respectful language, and then have the tough conversation about, okay, so maybe we should allow you to be happy somewhere else if you're not committed to what we're doing here.
So when you say trust, what does trust look like in an organization?
There should be at no time, should there ever be a space between a problem and you knowing about it. If you have trust, then people will bring you problems.
Yeah.
If you don't have trust, they will only bring you good news.
Fear will get you so far, but there's a limit there.
You want good news, of course, everybody wants good news. But people should be able to come to you and say, look, at this project is not not working the way we wanted, or this is going on, or this behavior is not right. And the other thing is you need to be open to hear it, because sometimes it's not very pleasant because you don't want to hear it, but you need to be open. You need to reserve judgment. You need to say, thank you very much for bringing that to my attention. We're going to put it on the agenda of to get to the bottom of this and figure it out. And nobody ever gets the repercussion for bringing it forward. No, you need to close the loop. You need to bring it back to them and say, oh, thank you for that. I can't tell you exactly what we're doing about addressing it, but have no doubt that we are addressing it. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for bringing this to my attention. Because sometimes there's privacy and rules and stuff around it. So I think if you are only getting good news as a leader, platitudes, things are fine, things are great, everything's a green light, boss, no problem. You have a problem.
So can you be counted on reliably to be open and receptive to feedback?
Yeah. And sit there and take it.
Yeah, even if it's about yourself or the mission that you came up with in the first place. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. So if someone says that's a stupid idea, Jordan,
I've had a
then
few.
You want to figure out why. Like, it's like, okay, tell me more.
Yeah.
You can't come in here and say that just like that. You need to come in here and not start talking to me and tell me why you think it's a bad idea. And you could be, and if it's right, that's fair enough. But you also need to be able to understand why we're doing this. So maybe they don't understand all of the why something is happening. So then that tells you something. All right, I have to spend more time talking to people, communicating to people, the reason why we're doing it this way and not that way.
So communication, be good at accountability, having the hard conversations, trust. Yeah. What else goes into that recipe? Courage. How so?
Well, we talked about having that tough conversation. Yeah. To have the courage to deal with things, the courage to be honest, the courage to be vulnerable. And like I say, vulnerability doesn't mean you're in tears every minute. But for example, one of my clients has had a health problem and they didn't know what to do with it. I said, you need to go and tell your staff that you are having this health problem, and this is what I need you to support me. You're not going to overshare. But what she needed was people to not ask her too many questions about what was going on. And she needed that space. But she needed to go and tell them that was happening, so that they understood. So maybe she was having a bad day one day because of this health issue, and they needed to understand what was going on. Because being a stoic, in the worst sense of the word, stoic, and not sharing and not being open was going to be detrimental to her and her team. You need to be courageous enough to be honest with people. So I had a client, and this was almost 10 years ago now, and it was it was an engineering company, and they were it was at one of those really terrible, I think in 2015, when the bottom fell out of the oil market, and it was bad. Yeah. And I said, you have to open your books. Not every intimate detail, but you have to open the books of your company so people see they see people disappearing and being laid off, and they think the company is going down the tubes and your good people are jumping ship. So you need to open your books and explain to people that you are actually making money every month, covering your costs, maybe not big profit numbers, and you have all of this work in the pipeline, and you have all of this sales effort, business development work going on, and you need to be open enough and do this every quarter so people can see that the ship is not sinking. Yeah, it's tough for sure.
Yeah, captain's got to be confident, courageous, again, back to the vision and making sure everybody's bought in, but at the same time, managing
this is what we're facing. This is the reality of what we're facing. But we have a plan, and this is what we're doing to address the plan. If I need your help, they will help you. They will get behind you if they understand and they trust you. They will get behind it. Sometimes just out of idle curiosity to see what might happen next, but that's okay. So, all of these, they're old words that we sometimes gloss over in 2024, and maybe the age of social media and sort of the way we function as organizations virtually more often than not, like honor and courage and honesty and trustworthiness fundamental words that as a leader we should be they should be our values North Star every moment of every day. And if you can't tell somebody the truth, then you need to say, I can't tell you that right now because it's confidential or it's whatever. But I just, instead of saying blowing them off or making something up, just say, I can't tell you, I can't answer that question today because it is. But as soon as I can tell you about it, I will tell you about it.
When it comes to trust, when it comes to leadership and those team dynamics, what's the role of friendship in there? I've heard, many times the beer test, could this person, you just go hang out and have a beer with them. But earlier you actually mentioned, you had somebody that you admired and respected that you worked with, but you're like, I definitely would not go for a beer with them. Where does that personal relationship, how do you utilize that or draw those lines when it comes to business and leadership?
Wowzers. So my first instinct is, you can't be friends with people you might have to fire. You can be friendly. I'm not sure friendship factors into that. Of course it does, right? Because we're human beings. But I don't know I don't know. Like, yeah, I love going out drinking with my team. When I had a team, going for a few beers, lots of laughs. But at the end of the day, I was still their boss. So I could not get hammered and carry on. I had to.
You got to be a good boy when you're going out and you're the boss.
I am the boss. And I think that, friendship. Now, interestingly enough, there's lots of people I used to work with in all sorts of organizations that I'm great friends with now because of the relationship we built while we worked together. But there was no doubt about it that I was the boss. And I had to make sure that I always purported myself accordingly.
Like, from my perspective, like, just in terms of small team leadership, like, friendship seems like not just important, but almost paramount. Like, at that stage, like working with a startup, like when you're that small of a team, maybe it does cost you 18 months in terms of if you got to fire somebody, do they wind up lingering longer because of that relationship? Is it almost necessary?
I think when you're a small team, like 6 to 8, whatever the number is, maybe to 20, I'm not sure. Because then you need something to hold the team together.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe that's friendship then. I'm not sure I'd use the word friendship. I don't know what the right word would be. But you need to be pretty friendly and tight.
Yeah.
You're more of a team of peers. But at a certain point, once you scale, then you need something else to put the ligaments and the sinews that hold the organization together. And I think there is a point where you have to be that boss, and you can't be friends with everybody. You have to start making hard decisions. Yeah.
I guess it depends on your ability to step back from the friendship and look at things objectively if the mission is not getting its objectives ticked.
Yeah, I think so. I think you need, and if you are too friendly with one or two people within an organization, I think it also sends a ripple effect around you that, oh, that person's tight with Steve. Jordan and Steve go drinking and golfing every Friday.
Yeah, I guess then are you creating jealousy or fostering a culture of brown nosing in the organization?
Yeah. So I don't think it's, it sounds pretty hard nosed when I think back what I just said.
You're a hard ass, Steve.
But I just think if you're the boss, you're the boss. You can be friendly about it and you can build great relationships with people, but you need to understand that at a certain point, as Truman said, the buck stops here.
Yeah. Right. I guess very dependent on size of the organization and just like ability to look objectively and step back from those dynamics and make sure you're focused on the right things.
That's right. Yeah. And are you being friendly? Are you making decisions at the detriment of of your goals and objectives in the organization.
Yeah, at the same time, like, are you just kind of like being friendly because that's one of your unmet social needs? Are you being friendly for the right reasons and not just ticking your own ego or whatever?
And are they friends because you're writing them a paycheck? I don't mean to be crass about that one either, but you are, people are going to treat you differently because you signed the paycheck too. So I think I would be very, at a certain point, I think, you mentioned your partner, you need somebody like that to be
bad cop, definitely.
Good cop, bad cop. If that's your personality, I'm not telling anyone to not be themselves, but if you're running a significant organization, there's a point where you have to be the boss. Somebody has to be the boss. Somebody has to be the adult in the room. Sorry, that's just the way it is. You're not running a country club because unless you're Jeff Bezos and have hundreds of billions of dollars, and if you pissed away 45 million of it, big deal. Well, that's only like 5% of my money. That's okay. Right? Most of us are not that person. And again, I go back to, I've said it a few times in the conversation. You are responsible for everyone in the company. And you're responsible to the company and your stakeholders and clients, not just your buds.
Yep. Very true. Very true. You got to make sure you're not like putting your head down. You got to keep your eyes on the bigger picture.
That's right. Yeah. And it can be expensive. Like, you have that person that my one client, great. He and I have become great friends. But right from the beginning, they were co-founders, and right from the beginning, I could see that there was like a marriage that was doomed to fail. Right, like at some point, this thing had to be called, and it took 8 years before they finally called it.
What was the fundamental incompatibility between the two?
One had enough, and one wanted to grow. One was he was satisfied.
Yeah.
You know what satisfied is? That's after you ate 2 servings of turkey dinner at Thanksgiving. You're satisfied, you're full, and you're lazy, and you want to have a nap.
Yeah.
And the other one was ambitious and hungry and wanted to grow. And I saw that right from the beginning. And I told them both that. I said, are you guys happy in this? Is this what you want? Like, we had that tough time. Oh, yeah. No, we understand. Yeah. So it took 8 years for them to finally call it.
Well, that's a tough one. Yeah. Ambition.
Yeah.
If somebody's operating on another order of magnitude and you're starting to get, I guess to them, what seems like pretty complacent, but
he was happy as guy was happy as a clam. He had more money than he ever made in his whole life. But he was fine.
Mission complete.
He was content and satisfied, which is not helpful sometimes. So, I'm not sure where I went with that, but that's one of the things that I was able to delve out of that. Is I'm not here to tell anybody to do anything. I'm just here to tell you what I think.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of being a consultant, right? Yeah. I'll tell you what you think. And if you want to do it, I'll help you. And if you don't want to do it, I'll do the best job I can to help you out to make it the best I can. But at some point, we have to call a spade here. And
tough love.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's say somebody's looking to get a hold of you. They want to go through some coaching. They need a little help, a little advice. Where does they find you?
Oh, my gosh. I'm the second easiest guy in Canada to get a hold of, Jordan. I'm not too proud to say that. I don't have too much of an ego, so I won't say I'm the first, just the second. So the best place of many is StevenArmstrong.ca. That's Steven with an N, Steven Armstrong, all one word, .ca. It's pretty much an open book. I think even on my website, you'll see fees and schedules and processes to work, I work with people. And you can drop me an email at Steve, Steve, at StevenArmstrong.ca anytime. I generally respond pretty quickly and try to make sure that people understand that nothing but I try to give the best customer service I can. And then at some point we have a conversation about whether there's a fit and whether it's going to work and whether we can work together, and then we make a deal.
And what does a typical coaching engagement look like? I guess in terms of frequency of sessions, in terms of duration and length, what would we be expecting?
Well, the first engagement usually is 90 days or 3 months, biweekly, an hour biweekly, and by the end of that, we generally come up with a plan. And then after that, then depending on what the person wants out of it, I generally go to like a monthly schedule after that, just to make sure an accountability. And but also I have basically I'm available by phone or by text or by email at any time if somebody bumps into a problem. Like uh, I'm available to them at any time they need help with. On the consulting side, it's a little bit different. It's generally a 6 month engagement with an possible extension for at least out to about a year, where I'll come in and I'll do one-on-one interviews with the leadership team and the whole organization, as many people in the organization as can. We do a bunch of online psychometric and organizational assessments that are extraordinarily, I think, are really good and very useful. And then we put a plan together to sort of help the leadership, to coach the whole leadership team forward, to bring them in a line based on what we've talked about earlier about alignment and communications and objectives and building trust and confidence in the organization.
Okay, well, you're very clearly a wise man with a lot of sage advice. So I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us in the audience today.
I need you to go and tell that to my wife. So
I'll send her a prescription. I'll write you a doctor's note if you need. I guess final question before we wrap up. We ask everybody this at the end of the show. What is your personal wellness routine? How do you keep yourself going?
Oh my gosh. So I have he's just got my EA dog laying on the floor behind me, walking my dog, getting outside. I used to be a lot more physically active, but life in the Army and life in hard has been hard on my knees and different parts of body parts. So I spend a lot of time walking. I have currently I have a 16-year-old and I have a grandson and two granddaughters, 4 and a year and a half. And nothing gives me more joy and pleasure than spending time with those two little girls. My grandson's in Ontario, so he's a bit further away. So it's exhausting and tiresome and wonderful at the same time. So that's what I do. And I know you're a doctor and you're probably going to freak out when I tell you this, but I do enjoy a good glass of scotch or a nice glass of wine, and every once in a while I'll sneak in a cigar there too, just because I'm already 64. And what are you going to do to me? Take my birthday away from me? It's okay.
It's good for the soul, not so much the lungs.
That's right. But so those are the things I try to look after myself. I try to stay active and fit. And like I say, the best thing that's happened to me in a long, long time is those two little girls. So.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, Steve, for joining us. Armstrong.ca, is that right?
That's right. Yeah. Thank you very much. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Anytime. Thank you.